People who saw the nice kid finally snap. What happened? My daughter was riding the bus home from school one day when an older student started taunting her. Her father had passed a couple months prior, and he had a drinking problem. Most of the school knew, but nothing was really said. This boy started getting in her face, saying things like, "Aren't you glad your daddy's gone? He was such a lowlife, drinking all the time," and other stuff along those lines. Bus driver told him to stop. He did for a few days, and then started again. That time, she got up out of her seat and just started pounding on him, first with her backpack, then with her fists. He ended up with a black eye, a bloody nose, and quite a few spectacular bruises. He was suspended from riding the bus for a week, but his dad, who was the school custodian, took it a step further. He took him to school the rest of the school year and had him help clean all the buses every day after they got back from dropping off the kids. Smashed his bully's head through a window. The school played dumb and pretended that they were never told that the bully was an actual bully. The school tried to expel the poor quiet kid. Got suspended instead, but it made me hate the administration so much. I was sick of being teased and picked on by this dickhead in class, so I slashed the top of his hand with a box cutter. This was 45 years ago, so fairly old school. Everybody there collaborated on some story about an incident, including the guy who got cut. I'm sure no one in authority believed it, but it went no further, and I never got bothered after that. Oh, a razor to the back of the hand. Ugh. A super nice quiet kid in my grade, who was often bullied by a much bigger kid, who was frankly an asshole to everyone, got into a huge fight with him during art class. I didn't see how it started, but the quiet kid just let loose and clawed the crap out of the bigger kid. It literally looked like a lion left giant bloody claw marks across the bully's neck. I've never seen anything so crazy. Well, at least not up until that point in my life. Unfortunately, both kids got into major trouble. I don't think the quiet kid had ever been in trouble in his life, and I saw him later that day walking down the hall with his mom, tears streaming down his face. I went to the principal and tried to advocate for him, but I don't know if it did anything. The school was well aware of the bully because he was always in trouble. Needless to say, the bully is now a cop in my town. This meek girl in my high school was bullied by the class jackass, who one day made one comment too many, and she broke a lunch tray over his head. To his credit, he stuck up for her in the office, and did admit that he deserved it. Good on her for sticking up for herself. Also, good on him for taking accountability. This woman, we'll call her Mary, who I worked with, was always pleasant and cheerful. She would say hello to people in the lunchroom, and was generally liked. She worked in finance and special projects, and said that she wanted to retire in a few years. She'd been there for about 15 years at this point, but for some reason her boss started pressuring her to complete our annual budget report faster. But this thing is huge and comprehensive. It's a figurative beast. Mary told the boss that it wouldn't be ready for a couple of weeks, per the usual schedule. The boss said that it needed to be completed within 1 week to give to the higher-ups. She told him it wasn't possible. So the boss emailed Mary and CC'd a bunch of coworkers and the assistant managers, calling Mary out for poor work ethic and for making the department look bad. Mary responded by saying it wasn't possible and that she didn't appreciate being bullied. She then put in her notice to retire by the end of the week, leaving her boss high and dry. She was the only one who could do the budget report in a timely manner, so the department was double screwed. Good for her. There was a teacher in my grade school that was known as the mean teacher. He was a great guy, super nice, but they gave him all the behavioral hard cases because he could put a stop to it well enough. In one situation, we had a sub-teacher. Partway through, a pair of students in the class just flat out kept pushing and pushing things, talking loudly, ignoring her when she tried to tell them to stop, etc. Eventually, she just burst out crying and left the room. Another teacher swapped in for the rest of the day. The next day, our normal teacher was back, and he taught us the first lesson, gave us our assignment to do, then told those two kids to stand up and follow him. They were brought outside the school, where he screamed at them for 10 minutes straight. Nothing bad in the sense of cursing or any of that, but of the sort of "how dare you treat a substitute teacher that way, she's trying to teach the class" variety. We could hear it clearly through the cinder block wall, and it was equal parts scary and hilarious. Eventually, the screaming stopped, and a few moments later, the three came back in. The two kids looked like they weren't quite sure if they died or were just slow about hitting the ground. She was an assistant manager and was known for being soft-spoken. At a manager's meeting, one of the GMs, who was known for being a total dick to everyone, was going off on how every store should be run. Well, this girl snapped. You have the highest turnover rate out of any store in the district. You can't keep employees for more than 6 months before they just quit, all saying that you were the problem. Maybe you should take that advice you're giving us and use it on yourself." She put in her 2 weeks' notice not even 3 days later. The manager who she yelled at was transferred to a different location out of that district. The store he managed has since bounced back and has been doing very well. I used to manage a pub in a small rural town of about 300 people in Australia. Running the joint was mostly a business of maintaining the peace between the itinerant oil and gas workers, and the local cattle industry families who resented their presence. The flashpoint for this conflict was frequently the jukebox in the bar. The oil and gas guys were usually city folks on fly-in, fly-out rotations, so their musical tastes somewhat differed from the locals. Anyway, there's this guy we'll call Brian, who is the heir apparent to one of the larger cattle empires in the district. Super cool guy, everyone liked him. He'd give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. Brian had a daughter who'd just married and was pregnant with her first kid. Sometime during the pregnancy, she'd noticed a dodgy-looking blemish on her butt, though she figured she'd wait until she had the kid to get looked at. Months later, she has the kid, goes to get it checked, skin cancer. They only gave her a few weeks to live. There's a huge funeral. Brian is just destroyed. At the end of the church service, there's a procession of vehicles out to the cemetery. Some Halliburton truck, impatient to be caught behind it, plows down the side of the road and spews dust over the whole thing. From then on, Brian would be down at the pub every other night. He'd get half smashed and throw the jukebox onto If I Die Young. Man was circling the drain, but nobody really knew what to do about it. Anyway, one night Brian's at the bar, and his song is on the jukebox. Some guy in Halliburton patched high-vis starts bitching about the song choice. I tell them just to leave it be, but one of them gets up and unplugs the jukebox. Brian plugs it back in and puts the song on again. One of the Halliburton guys calls Brian a pretty offensive slur. Brian tells him to go screw himself, and at this point I can't recall who threw the first punch. But between the fight starting and the couple of seconds it took me to break it up, Brian did enough damage to put the guy in an ambulance. As for those wondering how this all turned out for Brian, there was no trouble with the police because the town didn't even have a police officer at the time, and the gas worker couldn't have his boss knowing that he'd been brawling with the locals at the pub. I also haven't lived in that town for a couple years, but last I heard, Brian was still running the family cattle stations and raising his granddaughter because the son-in-law works on a fly-in, fly-out basis, 3 days on and 1 day off. So guys, that's it for today. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you did. I'm ReddList. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.